join us. And for this first session of the Volunteer Management Network 2022, I'm Brian from MPAC, and this is our second time doing the co-organizing with NCSS on Volunteer Management Network. I hope you have a good week so far and ready to learn and share experience in Volunteer Management Network matters with your fellow participants today. If you have not changed your display name on Zoom, please change it so that you can see the name of the organization and your name, so that your fellow participants can see who is in today's event itself. We are expecting more than 200 plus participants today, so you will see a lot of your fellow volunteer management practitioners this afternoon. And just as we start the event itself, just some quick technical information. Today, we're going to use Slido to interact with you in various segments itself. If you are using your mobile phone, you can scan the QR code that's displayed on the screen right now. If you are using Slido on your laptop or desktop, you can also go to slido.com and key in the event code 9147376. And that's the event code 9147376. And if you so happen to be joining us on the go and using a mobile phone, if you can, please have another device with you so that you can participate in the Slido easily, because we're going to use quite a lot of Slido today to interact with you. Now, we also be using Slido during the question and answering session with the speakers today. We have 3 speakers, and usually the most popular segment of the Volunteer Management Network is a Q&A session with the speakers. So later, when you are using the Slido, you will see that there is actually a tab that says the Q&A tab here on the screen. Let me just point out to you on screen. If you're using a mobile phone, you will see it on, if you're using a browser, you see it on the tab as well. And if you're using a mobile phone, you can toggle between Q&A and poll, right? So this is the same link we're using with you throughout this whole session today. And during the Q&A itself, if you have specific question that's for a speaker, please actually indicate which speaker it is for. If you are asking a question for all the speakers, you can indicate as all. On the end later, we will give you more instruction on how we carry out the Q&A. And also, I'm sure you have some questions. I mean, you might have been interacting with NCSS very frequently, but if let's say there's any question that's directed to NCSS later and not intended for the speaker, please use the regular Zoom chat window on screen. And the speakers and the MC only the speakers and MC will speak during the session itself. Everyone else, unfortunately, will be muted for today's session itself. Now, if it's actually a question directed for NCSS, we will get the NCSS team to respond to your question as soon as we can during the session itself. Right? So I'm sure you're already quite familiar with the Zoom functions. I'm just going to point out to you that if you're using the Zoom function, you'll see the chat window there, and you will be able to talk to we will be able to chat with everyone in today's session itself. So that's interactivity that we can use these days on virtual space. All right, so some of you might be very new to Volunteer Management Network. Let me just quickly introduce to you what is Volunteer Management Network is about. So the Volunteer Management Network is actually organized by NCSS to provide volunteer management practitioners with the opportunity to learn from subject matter experts and fellow practitioners, share the best practices among the SSAs, as well as enact collaborations with the social service within the social service ecosystem itself. You would like to know that the overall theme for this year's Volunteer Management Network 2022 is charting the new horizon in volunteer management. And in line with that, we have actually designed 4 topics for the next 4 sessions. And today's session, this is our first session for this series. Our session topic today will be forging strategic volunteer partnership to achieve greater social impact. Right. So this is the first session. Welcome so much for those who are still streaming in. Maybe before I continue, just a quick reminder for those who just joined us, please change the display name on screen so that you can have your name of the organizations and your own name, so that the rest of us who are joining in this session itself will know who we have in the room. Right, so this is a brief outline of what we're going to cover today. We are starting on time, so we are pretty good on time itself. Later in the, after my introduction itself, we'll be sharing with you the pre-event survey findings we've actually collected from all the participants who have registered for today's event itself. Following that, we'll have three speakers. We're very honored to have three speakers to share with us how you can actually forge long-term strategic volunteer partnership. We have Priscilla Gan, the director of NCSS Volunteer Resource Optimization Team. We also have Ku Keeling, the volunteer manager from SPD. Finally, in the last segment itself, we will have Jimmy Ong, the VP from Global Public Affairs, Corporate Citizenship from City Singapore. Right. So after the three speakers do their presentation, we will take some time to have a panel discussion, and you will have an opportunity to have some questions for the speakers. And before we go, as with all NCSS event itself, we do want to hear from you. What is your feedback about the session? So we run a quick live feedback session with you. All right. So people are still streaming in. They're just in time for some of the shareback we have actually gotten from the survey itself. Now, some of you would remember that during the registration itself, we have invited you to participate in a very quick survey itself. And today is the right platform for us to share with you some of what we have found out from your fellow practitioners. We have received a total of 139 responses, for quite a high number. All right. And most of you, nearly 40% of you are from the social service agencies, and nearly 1/3 of you are from non-profit organizations. Of course, among us today, we have participants from the government ministries, public agencies, corporates, and also ground-up initiative, or even social enterprise. Quite a diverse audience today with us today. So we asked you a lot more questions about strategic volunteer partnership itself. And first off, we've asked, in your opinion, how important is building strategic volunteer partnership in your organization? I think quite overwhelmingly, more than 90% of you shared that it's either extremely important or important for you to build strategic volunteer partnerships in your organizations. All right. And of course, we also hear from you what are the type of volunteer partnership that they usually engage in. I think from the chart, it's actually quite clear that about 1/3 of you are partnering with organization in either ad hoc or events-based partnership. About another 1/3 of you are also involved in short or medium-term partnership itself. That's really quite encouraging. I think quite more encouragingly, we are starting to see more of you having long-term partnership. About 1/4 of our participants have a long-term partnership. And certainly we hope after today's event itself, more of you will be inspired to work together, to work towards a long-term partnership with the existing partners or new partners. So this is really a good opportunity for you to learn some of the insights and experience from our speakers on how you can develop long-term strategic volunteer partnership. And we also ask who are the people that you usually partner with. So most of you say that you're either partnering with another social organization, either they're ground-up groups or grassroots organizations. And many of you also partner with local members, local community members. And about 1/4 of you do partnership with corporate partners as well. Increasingly, we see some of you as having partnership with national intermediaries, associations, or membership bodies. So this is another area of partnership you might explore further after today's conversation. And finally, we also asked you what are some of the challenges you face in building this sort of volunteer partnership. I think 40% or 42% of you say that building long-term sustainable partnership has always been a challenge. Slightly above 1/3 of you say that creating the right volunteer program options that works for both your organization or your member or your volunteer partner has been a challenge. A small percentage of you say that you are not always able to find the available volunteer partners. So I think there are some things that we can work through it today. All right. And finally, what is something that you hope to take away after attending today's session? I think majority of you wanted to learn how to build long-term and strategic volunteer partnership. Yeah, in the right place. Three speakers will share with you extensively about their knowledge, insights, and experience. And so some of you also want to seek new resources by NCSS for your volunteer management work itself, right? So quite interesting insights that we gather from you. Thank you so much for your participation when you register with us, supplying us with these insights that we can actually collate and share with our audience today. Now, before we actually invite our speakers to join us in today's session to present what they have in mind, I'm going to invite you to just quickly do the thought sharing session with us. This is a right moment for you to take up your mobile phone or go to slido.com. So if you're using a mobile phone, can you scan the QR code that is actually on the right-hand side of the screen itself? If you are joining Slido on the browser, you can go to slido.com and enter the event code 9147376. Right? Let me repeat itself, 9147376. Feel free to join the Slido right now. Right? Let me know if you have any. Let us know if you have any challenge in joining Slido. Right, so we have 3 questions that we would like invite your feedback on. The first question we have is, use one word to describe how you feel about the results of the pre-event survey we just presented. The second question is, use one word to describe how you feel about strategic volunteer partnership. And the last one is really more open, more of a statement itself. See whether you agree with us that you understand what is strategic volunteer partnership and you're confident to develop one or more, right? I'll give you a few minutes to go through that. Right, the results are streaming in. I'm going to show you very quickly. I think more of you are actually doing that right now. Let me just show you on screen. Right, so the first question we asked you, use one word to describe how you feel about the results of the pre-event survey we just presented. So I think this is a word cloud, right? If you have not seen the word cloud for Sunday, it's a word cloud. So in the middle, actually, most of you say it is expected. So some of you feel it's insightful, it's interesting, unsurprisingly, okay? So very relatable, very relevant, right? That's really coming really good. Thank you so much for your participation. Right, let's see what you say about the second question that we have. The second question we have asked you is, use one word to describe how you feel about a strategic volunteer partnership. I think a lot of you feel it is important. I think it's quite similar to how we responded during the survey itself. And many of you also say that it's challenging, it's complex, it's essential, it's hopeful, it's exciting. Right. I think our next speaker, Priscilla, will have a lot of food of thought that you can integrate in your presentation later. Right. In view of time, I'm going to move to the next questions. The next question we've asked you, whether you agree to it or not, you understand. So the question is, I understand what is strategic volunteer partnership, and I'm confident to develop one or more. All right. So I think quite a large number of you, about 76% of you is changing. Right, so about 44% of you agree with that, and then 16% of you strongly agree with that. So about 1/3 of you neither agree or disagree, right? I think after today's session, I hope that will change, right? That will make you feel that you understand the strategic volunteer partnership better, and you're more confident to develop one. All right, thank you so much for your input. I think this is a really exciting input that we have gotten from our audience today. I'm going to move on from there. And first we have we will now move on to the presentation from our speakers. Our first speaker is actually Priscilla Gunn. Priscilla is the director. Priscilla is the director of the volunteer resource optimization team at NCSS. Priscilla and her team has been working with and engaging the VMPs and SSAs a lot on the volunteer management matters itself. And through its extensive groundwork, the team has discovered some of the key motivators behind long-term strategic partnership and what are some of the key success factors behind this partnership. I'm sure Priscilla has a lot more to share with you today. I'm going to hand over to Priscilla. Priscilla, over to you.
Thank you so much, Brian. A very good afternoon to everyone, and really good to see all of you again while in virtual. But the feeling is still the same. I think it warms our heart to always see the VM community gathered together, on a terrific Thursday afternoon, investing time, setting aside time, apportioning time amidst the busy schedules that I know all of you have, but you're prioritizing in this investing of time into ourselves as we learn and grow together as an individual and as a community to be able to cope better with the evolving trends and to also soak up the best practices that we can glean from one another and the various perspectives. So just want to, once again, thank you all for what you do in catalyzing volunteerism in Singapore. I think Brian shared a little bit about this volunteer management network, and I just want to give a very quick year in review of the past series of volunteer management network that we ran over the past 12 months with 4 sessions and attended by over 800 participants. Various topics were curated, and thank you all for taking time once again for attending the previous series of volunteer management network with today's as the first of the 4-part series of our next series, which is really themed forging, charting a new horizon in your volunteer management and being able to push new frontiers in the work that we do. So just wanted to really dive in, for today's topic, which is really a very important topic, as all of you have shared, and it's expected, the results, are expected, and indeed everybody feels that it is something that we cannot do without as part of our overall volunteer management strategy. I just wanted to perhaps start off by doing, some basic reflections, for everyone. And I know we have various groups attending here today, SSAs, MPOs from other sectors, ground up in social enterprises, as well as our, fellow public agencies and ministries who also run national volunteering programs like SAF, Volunteer Call. We have EIC, Silver Generation Ambassadors Program. So some of the questions that you may be also asking, and that might have also to sign up for today's session would be perhaps, have we all been really swamped with coordinating with the individual volunteer signups and taking so much of our time to coordinate versus other, important strategic work that we could perhaps be doing as well in coming up with strategies and institutionalizing of best practices within your organization for the longer term sustainability of, the volunteerism. Have you also compared the proportion of your individual signups versus the group signups? And if you have done so, if you've not done so, it'll be good to do a stock take. But if you have done the stock take, what then would be your volunteer partnership strategy to drive more individual signups, perhaps getting them to refer and be morphed into a group, organized group, and if you have already some group signups, what then would be the next progressive state to push them up towards, whether from ad hoc volunteering event by an organized group to perhaps something much more, which we will be happy to share a little bit more later on. I also thought that it's always good to start off with problem statements so that I think we are all here to solve problems and to be able to co-create solutions together and share best practices so that the problems will all go away and, we'll have good solutions to, take us, give us quantum leaps, into progressive states of our volunteer management practices. So some of the typical, feedback and sharing from corporates sometimes, on, what, the charities and also other organizations that need volunteers, whether grassroots or whether, other organizations. Sometimes what they say is that, the frequency and the understanding kind of like can't quite plug in, to what they are saying. For example, they are talking about, SDGs and perhaps SGX, for corporate, they might be looking at SGX, ESG framework, for example, and they are trying to brew something to work towards achieving those outcomes. But I know sometimes our charities may not kind of understand what could be perhaps out there in the landscape. So I thought it will be, one of the problem statements that we hope to be able to give some insights. And that's also why we have also invited Jimmy from Citi to come and share as well. Sometimes it could be, very more operational and, day-to-day, run of some of the work that we do. Sometimes I know we're quite caught up. So sometimes there may not be some response and from charities or low response, and some charities may not be able to give an articulate impact, which a lot of organized groups, especially corporates, are looking at. And the last one is increasingly a lot of organized groups like the corporates, they are looking at something that's more structured and strategic. And sometimes I think, they may feel that specific charities versus other charities, are able to do it better versus others, and they steer towards and lean towards certain charities that are able to understand what they're looking at and be able to implement and take action and morph, the partnership and the relationship into that strategic partnership that we are here to talk and dive deeper into. And I'll just caveat, to say that I'm using the word corporates, but actually it's loosely to mean organized groups, because these days we are also, encouraging our charities to also not just, reach out to corporates, but also other organized groups that are, within your locale, or, that would have some, acquisition strategies, referred in by existing donors or existing volunteers. So it could be organized groups like ground-ups, social enterprises, or grassroots, or religious groups, schools, and even public agencies. They also sometimes do their own CSR as well. Like I know Ministry of Manpower is very big on volunteerism, staff volunteerism. So these are potential terrains that you might want to venture into, where you can then plug into organized groups. So these are some of the problem statements. Then on the other hand, our charities do share with us sometimes as well, where they don't have enough volunteer partnerships and they need a lot of volunteers, but they have not been perhaps successful in getting them. A lot of times they have a lot of hard work and effort. They have been calling them, emailing them, and writing good, emails, but sometimes, and oftentimes they may politely decline. Then there are also other, challenges that our charities face, where they may not have the digital system or the data collection points to be able to pull together certain reports or certain outcomes and indicators that the corporates actually do want, because they need to land in their sustainability report, for example. And so these are some of the problem statements, that, both sides face. And as always, how do we then arrive at the middle ground, at the common ground, both sides inching closer to one another, whether in terms of perspective or in terms of, the real action. So I thought I wanted to really dive a little bit about how well do we know our, corporates, as I said, using it in a more, in a more looser term, but actually, but using this as a way to share really some modalities and some of the concepts, that you might want to be looking into when you look at organized groups coming from various entities, whether corporate, religious group. But broadly, using corporates as an example, and just to also share that it's really important for us to know our corporates. And this is really a very general and motherhood statements, right? Like, know our corporates, what does it really mean? Is it just relationship, drinking coffee, and sending festive greetings? But it's definitely much more than that. And of course, the more you know them, just like how the banks, they have this KYC, your customer. I think you'll be able to also, build rapport with the customers, and I think when we relate that to our social service and CSR, the volunteering, I think it's important for us to know their mandate, know that, a lot of times, a lot of these groups may have mandates, and sometimes their mandates may not be just a local, it could be coming from a global, for example, some MNCs in Singapore, they may have a global mandate that requires them to perhaps look into youth development, strictly just youth development, meaning to say that they may not consider any other, strategic partnerships with charities from, let's say, a certain other subsectors. So it's important to do some research on their CSR mandate, so that you can reach out to the correct group of targeted entities that would kind of like flow with also what your services are. So that's something that is quite important, because I know oftentimes charities do share with us sometimes that they've been perhaps reaching out to maybe one corporate, but for a long time they have not been able to respond, and quite lukewarm, and actually realize that their mandate really lies somewhere else, and it's something that maybe there could have been better communication between both sides, or maybe some research done so that they could invest their energies accordingly to the correct places. And also staff strength, not just about the size, but do we know, for example, perhaps they have different departments, right, within an entity. And with that, then you'll be able to also, work with them to see how can you talk about participation, staff participation rate, which is sometimes really on the heads of the HR folks and the CSR champions, on corporates, where they want to look at participation rate and to drive, people to volunteer more. And that requires you to perhaps think about, what are the kind of opportunities, volunteering opportunities that you can recreate, redesign, scope up in order to meaningfully be able to plug in as a one-stop shop, so that you could be coming in at different seasons or at different events to have a holistic volunteering experience with your charity, and that's something to consider as you curate your volunteering strategy. And also good to also know if they have volunteerism leave. And just yesterday, I was just having a call with a partner from Macquarie Group, and they just shared the good news that they are going to institute 2 volunteer leave, in their company. And a lot of companies, they have from 2 to 5 days, depending. So it's just good to know so that you could also, again, speak the same language. And sometimes they do want to encourage the employees to use volunteer leave so that they could, at the end of the day, be able to track and report back local and global. And that is something that if you help them to also meet the outcome, it is also then good to then, kind of like redesign your volunteer opportunities towards volunteer leave. And so I kind of like covered some of the business proposition. I think this is important. For example, if you're talking to a bank, most of the time they would like to talk about financial literacy or even digital literacy. If you're talking to, for example, a developer, for example, sometimes they like to volunteer in other ways. For example, can they come in as participatory, design for your new family center, or can they come in, so I think there are 2 ways that they could help. Of course, they could still come in to help us on, the more general volunteering opportunities like befriending, which is very popular, but it's always good to layer on, if you could present a suite of volunteering opportunities to them, layer on top of the services, let's say the befriending kind of opportunities, but be able to perhaps curate some that will also be better able to plug into their mandate, to their business proposition. I think that would then strengthen your overall volunteering pitch, so that when it's layered this way, because it does fulfill what they need to advocate in terms of their vision and mission, and using their business proposition, within the communities that they exist. So this is really some broad thoughts about knowing your so-called corporate, and knowing the entity that you would like to engage, and then translating it to being able to cover more broadly and some of the conversations that, some of the trends that they are quite soaked in, for example. So let's say, for example, if you're engaging corporates, it's helpful to know that, to know broadly what the 17 SDGs from United Nations would be. And actually, you'll be very surprised, and some of you might know, actually in United Nations SDG, the entire strategy, there is actually a volunteerism strategy, global volunteerism strategy that is carved out to be mapped to achieve all the 17 UN SDGs. So it's, and all the heads of states in a way kind of like know that, volunteerism will help to propel and drive, the achievement of all the 17 SDGs, which is in the mindset and psyche of all the corporates. But I know that it's also, once again, beyond corporates, because it's actually a whole of country efforts towards, these global goals. So ministries are playing a part, different entities, ground up, social enterprises, they're all gravitating, all the good that they are doing towards all these global, framework. And of course, within Singapore, it's just good to know, and you can always read out from internet and SGX website, do we know that actually, if you want to engage Singapore listed companies, let's say a DBS, for example, actually they are required by SGX to actually do a report on environmental sustainability and governance. And the sustainability part will be a lot of where we come in, because they do need that kind of impact and indicators for them to report into this report. So you can always check out Singtel and SingPower. They have very good sustainability reports. So that you could kind of like know how they write it, and you can kind of like, be able to pitch and articulate at the end of the day what they actually do need when the action has been done. And I think we'll be happy to share some models later, but I think broadly, there are some progressive corporate volunteer partnerships done in Singapore and globally, which I'm happy to share some later, as well as do you also kind of like look out for local and global campaigns, for you to use it as an opportunity or as an entry teaser to bring in maybe certain groups, organized groups to come in to participate. And sometimes they could, perhaps start off, doing awareness and advocacy. For example, Purple Parade, you see many organizations all, carrying the purple, signboard. I mean, where they print out on their own printers and then they hold it up, really with so much pride. I think these are different campaigns that you can feel free to write on. There's also SG Cares Giving Week coming up and the various, World Mental Health Day. These are potential angles and perspectives that you could bring into what you do, especially if it relates to the services you provide, and use that perhaps also as a conversation piece or starter or teaser to then be able to draw them closer to the cause that you're here to engage. And of course, when we talk about volunteer partnership strategy, you look at the bottom part, it would be perhaps good, when it's possible and there's time that you carve out, look into really, what is your acquisition model? Where are the sources of acquisition that you have been bringing on board all these partners? Are they through your board members or are they through co-calls, but skew also a little bit more towards people that actually that will always help. Then what is your way of engagement, and then development as well as retention? These are the usual volunteer life cycle, but in terms of translating it to this particular segment of volunteers that you're hoping to engage more, which would be the organized groups, which is volunteer partnerships, do consider this subsector frame as well. So I talk about UN SDGs as well as SGS. I won't run through it, but increasingly, I just want to share with you some of the insights that we have also learned and gleaned from a lot of the polls that has been done with our volunteer management practitioners, like all of you at various engagement platforms. We realize that these are the 5 things which will be quite key and important for our charities increasingly to know and to perhaps gravitate some of their, curate some of the events and activities towards. So of course, I think we know about, volunteer engagement appreciation. Do we leverage, like, for example, I know of a charity that has been around for quite some time, but recently they are starting out to do their inaugural volunteer appreciation for the very first time, and they intend, of course, to do it annually. I know some of you may already have that, but if you have not, consider a structured way to bring on board all these, create all these platforms in order for your partners to be then publicly affirmed, whether by your CEO or by even your patron, who could be a POH, political office holder. I think feel free to create these events so that they could be honored and, affirm with that longer intent to get them to step up in their support towards what you need for a more structured relationship, a more long-term relationship. Measuring volunteer satisfaction, because some organized groups do like that, so that they could also know how can they improvise and improve when they also supply the volunteers. So sometimes when charities do have certain tools to help them to measure, else they have to do it on their own. Not an issue, big issue, I guess, but if they could do a one-stop integrated approach through all of us, from the MPO side, I think that will also help them to give them some data and information, and they also can see your level of your volunteer management practices are at a level that they feel it's so easy to plug in with all of us. We have a lot of things that they need, so I think that also cements a bit more of the relationship in terms of the smooth, flow of things now. Something increasingly that we're seeing a lot of corporates reaching out to also ask, which we you may want to consider also scoping or redesigning some of the roles, which is skills-based volunteerism, and as mentioned, quite twin with their mandate, on the business proposition. So something that you might want to consider posturing some of your volunteering opportunities. And I talk about the impact, as well as I talk about being able to increase participation rate within their entity, regardless of schools or corporates, because they do want to be able to measure that, and also from the HR perspective or internal staff engagement perspective, naturally the more participation they have, it definitely means a successful outcome on their part. And if you are able to curate those opportunities, I think that will really help. I think moving on to really some of the other macro information that you want to soak up in your time would be the NVPC. They do very good corporate giving survey once every 3 years. Some of the information you might want to take a look. I think it gives you a very good perspective of what corporates are wanting, from their part, from their corporate branding perspective. If it's marketing and public relations, corporate branding, then do we actually also then post about what they do, so that could perhaps be able to yield a longer term support from corporates. If they're talking about employee morale, for example, once again, then are we scoping enough volunteering opportunities so that we could be potentially a bit more of the one-stop shop for them to plug in to various volunteering experiences. So this is a report that I think we usually also share with a lot of volunteer management practitioners. But I also want to bring your focus and attention towards also needs-based, because on one hand, I know we are trying to marry the needs and the wants, right? And sometimes corporates do want certain things. Sometimes their employees, maybe they want to do a voting, they want to support maybe seniors or special needs, so I think it's a lot of motivations which we are trying to then marry to also the needs and have a balanced approach, because too much on any extreme is definitely not going to help the plugging in. So I think sometimes in your conversation it's also good to share with the corporates what would be the landscape, what are the needs, and then be able to draw them towards some of these desired outcomes. So I really want to run through this one, because I think we're quite familiar on some of the needs that we can to pitch to our corporates. This is some thoughts that we have for you to consider pursuing, in the forward path ahead, to be able to then try to gun for more number of longer term and strategic partnerships. So I talk about satisfaction, which is the second part. We talk about the key data, which I mentioned about. So this is something that our MPOs can consider what they need to do. Is it about coming up with a volunteer survey, or is it using a Google form? Some way to capture the data. For some of the corporates that you have been engaging for a while, it could be also time to see if you would like to consider something even at a higher level, other than having 5 to 10 years of volunteering, with this corporate or this organized group. There are some charities that are really very strategic in pursuing long-term partnerships with corporates by signing MOU, and then they have a media release and it's out there in the news, not so much for glam and glory purposes, but it was really a signal and a symbolic act of a commitment, a long-term commitment between both sides, which is really, really good for our wider community to have more of such. So this is what I do see a lot of our charities, increasingly are doing. And again, they write on their political office holder who are patrons, advisors, and then they get them to come and witness the signing of the MOU, at a new place that they're going to launch, or, to signal that there's 3 to 5 years of partnership. So something that you might want to consider, especially for those that have been volunteering with you for quite a while. And I think you're trying to think what is then the next lap, to pursue. But I know also that, for new donors, for new volunteers, they may not, of course, at the onset be signing this, because they want a teaser. So I think there are different entry points, but at whichever state that they are in, I think our common goal is to get all of them at whichever state they're in to all move up. Like SN Taman talks about the escalator theory, whichever step that we are on at the escalator step, right? I think it's everybody is going up, So I think that's something that we are striving to do, to convert, to bring in new corporate partners, maybe with some teaser and some, ad hoc volunteering opportunities, if that works for a start. Later on, then move up the curve. And for those who are more mature, what is the next step? And could that be a symbolic MOU signing to go a longer term to adopt, the service for 3 to 5 years? Talking about comms as well, something that I think a lot of organized groups, I think they also do look at such a brand related kind of comms on their part. So that's something that you can also consider stepping up, versus doing, and then we move on to the next volunteering opportunity, then move on. But actually do consider using marketing and work closely with the marketing team to actually allow the impact to flow through a little bit more also for them who has given to us, and we also are giving back to them in terms of affirmation. And so these are some thoughts. And the last part is a lot of our charities have shared with us that a lot of times they reach out to organized groups, and a lot of times it's really sometimes maybe no, or they have been really crowded by many other MPOs who are reaching out to them. So one thing that I think is good to consider is about you deploying people who can actually get that outcome, versus, let's say, ourselves. While we can still reach out to some contacts, for example, but consider maybe getting your CEO or even your president and chairman of your board to perhaps identify some of their friends that they know very well who can make decisions, perhaps are C-suites within their, whether it's grassroots or corporates or schools, consider for them to reach out, on your behalf, and you kind of like staff them to do it, while we have our own separate engagement directly to get certain partners, but you kind of like cast your net wider. So I realized that a lot of charities have not been taking this approach quite widely, and a lot of times, they're very hardworking, they're very diligent, but a lot of times actually, if they could see themselves like a stage manager, where they actually are deploying different resources to work very hard, for us, for our volunteer management outcomes. So you get your CEO to work for you, get your, chairman to help you on this, and I think you just help to prepare and really draft or piece certain information for them to enable them to better do that easily. And I can tell you this approach is most of the time higher success rates for sure lah. And instead of the usual cold call emails, which a lot of times corporates may not even respond. So consider that. And there are also other modalities where you can use, where you can even host luncheons, for example, that maybe your patron or your advisor can host a very cozy lunch with 10, 20, or a very small session where they can talk about your charity and then be able to share about, where are the volunteering opportunities that you can help. Such modalities, we also realize, have been working very well as well, because it allows for intimate conversation and deeper understanding of the work that you do, and people get to know each other, meet in person over a cozy, luncheon. And, so I think these are different ways in which you could then inch forward towards getting more corporate or volunteer partnerships. So what are, some of the ingredients that will make a successful and volunteer partnership? This is just some of the pointers where, when I talk about wrap around your organization's needs, it could be really like, an MNC, for example, being able to adopt your services, one of the services, and another corporate perhaps adopt another of your services, let's say even for 6 months, in a way that you can move on to look for another organized group to adopt, that same services for the remaining 6 months, and in a way be able to plot out and schedule all the needs that you actually have, but you realize they're all quite plugged in by organized groups, and then you could move on to be able to do more on relationship building, cementing the relationship, getting things, plotting the growth path of these stakeholders. So these are just this is just a summary of some of the pointers I mentioned earlier about creating awareness, getting higher participation rate, and mobilizing your boards and senior management to actually help you as well. So this is really about starting, dreaming big, but starting small. Some of our charities also share with us that, they may not have the bandwidth and the time, to really engage so many. But we want to suggest, and, for you to consider appointing a champion if that's the case. Some we can do it on our own, but I realize some charities have also been very cleverly tapping on volunteer leaders that they have and identifying them to kind of like be the relationship manager for, one or two corporates, and another one or two corporates. So there are different models that you can do in order for you to expand your capacity to be able to inch towards this terrain beyond carrying it on our shoulders. And it's just a matter of being a good resource strategist. You kind of like a command center, exactly, what needs to be done, but not done all through ourselves, but you actually get people to actually work, to get those outcomes. So this is really just a simple process, to consider piloting and starting small while dreaming big. But the dreaming big part, I think, will be important, because 90%, 80% is about planning, and 20% sometimes is about implementation, right? So I think it's always good to take time and take stock and be able to chart out the volunteer strategy, the volunteer partnership strategy, and then face it, in starting small and then slowly moving up the curve on what you want to achieve. Just to give you and wrap up with some models that we have seen, I will leave Jimmy to run through this, but this is really one of the relationships that I've seen between two entities, City and YMCA, have gone really well. There's brand name created, there's the co-brands, the initiative, the service, and they've gone a long way. And I'm sure Jimmy will be able to share, what is it that takes and what is it that they're looking for from our MPOs in order for them to go such a long way with, and they've done so much with them. This is out there in the media. This is what we hopefully, could see more of our MPOs grow towards, where they are plugged into an organized group, for example, in this case, Lions Befrienders and DBS, where the commitment came in to actually, share that, they will send 1,000 of the DBS staff to Lions Befrienders as digital and to be something that all of us can pursue, and slowly move some of our existing partnerships and another one that we
I think Priscilla must be facing some technical issue on her laptop, but let's rest assured she have actually covered most of what she has actually covered. I'm sure she can share a bit more about what she missed out in the last two case study itself. Okay, I hope you're hearing me well. Priscilla, are you still there? Ah, yes, you're back.
Connection issue.
Yeah, we have a brief connection issue.
Okay, so let me wrap up a little bit more, just one more slides. So sorry about it. I was on the RSPP model. So just wanted to share a little bit about this model where the volunteer management team was able to scope out different roles for different corporates to adopt and to take on, which I thought was really brilliant. So I think also better we are at scoping out the roles and better at also giving visibility to some of the organized groups that we are trying to target and to engage through media or through social media. I think overall that will help to strengthen our to court more volunteer partners. And wrapping up really on some of the resources on top of sessions like this where we can share best practices. We hope some of the resources that we've built, like the corporate volunteer partnership and the volunteer management toolkit, will be of good help, in giving you some insights and a structured process in securing some of these, partnerships. And lastly, just want to end off really by again affirming all of you for the role that you play. This was a quote, by Speaker Tan, who's our NCSS advisor as well as co-chair of SG Cares, and he talks about how all of you who are here today, who manage volunteers, are very important in creating the society that we all want. On top of course, most importantly, being able to change lives and accelerating the transformation of lives. If we can do this better and court more volunteer partnerships, everything help will go more, not just swiftly to the ground, but also really will flow in great strength, to help our people on whom we're here to serve. So with that, I'll pass the time back to Brian. Thank you all, and happy to chat later. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Priscilla, for your presentation. And just a slight glitch of the issue. I'm sure most of the people have actually heard what you say. And also, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge about what are some of the key factors that influence a long-term sustainable partnership between SSA and corporates. I think there's some questions coming through itself. For those of you who have a lot of questions that you have in mind after listening to Priscilla, feel free to go on to the Slido itself, tap on the Q&A tab itself, and then you can enter the questions that you have in mind for Priscilla and for the next two speakers that we have lined up for you. And also, while you are adding in your question, it will be helpful for us to know who actually posted those questions. If you can at least also add your name as well as the organization behind the question itself, so that later when we're going through the question itself, we were answering the question, we know who we're going to provide the answer to. All right, so feel free to use your mobile phone, scan the QR code, or go to slido.com and enter the event code 9147376. So we have next our speaker. Next speaker we have is actually Khoo Keeling. She's a volunteer manager with SPD. Keeling is also a NCSS volunteer management champion. NCSS volunteer management champion is actually a leadership program for those who are actually experienced volunteer managers, and these experienced volunteer managers are also taking on the role to mentor newer volunteers and also share best practices in the sector. Keeling is going to present on how SPD achieve long-term strategic volunteer partnerships with individuals, corporates, and community groups, and how it has benefited not just the service users served by SPD, but also expand the capacity of the staff in SPD. I'm going to hand over to Keeling. Over to you, Keeling.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again to NCSS for this invitation to share about what SPD and our experience with volunteers are. So allow me to share my screen. Yeah, you're able to see the screen well?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So yeah, I think Priscilla has given a very good overview of the macro landscape of volunteering and how volunteer and SS is like us can partner to bring actually a greater impact to our clients and the beneficiaries we serve. So I'm here to share from an organizational perspective some of the experience we have in what we did to try to forge lasting volunteer partnerships. So to begin, I will share with a little bit about what my organization does. So we are SPD, founded in 1964. Formerly, we were known as the Society for the Physically Disabled because we were serving predominantly those with physical disability like muscular dystrophy, spinal cord, and such. But in the recent years, we have expanded our scope of services to also serve the sensory with intellectual and developmental disability. Hence, we have been rebranded to be called just SPD. So a little bit about us. What my organization aims to do is to help people with disabilities to be able to reach their fullest potential. So we serve, our clientele group ranges from the very young babies to the elderly, and we want to help them to achieve their goals in education for the students. And for the adults, well, our focus will be on employment and how they can contribute back to the society. And of course, for the elderly, as they progress in their life stage, to be able to be as independent as they can and to age in place. So to do what we do, we can't do that alone. So volunteers play a very big role in supporting us in our cause and the work that we do. So what kind of volunteers do we have at SPD, which I believe is very similar across all the other organizations here? First off, we have the event-based, or what we call the ad hoc type of activity. So the picture you see here is our charity walk that we hold once a year. So this is like a mass event where we are able to engage volunteers in various roles like traffic marshals, maybe the station masters, game masters, and all that. We also have service-based voluntary, which is an in-center voluntary where the volunteers come and be part of the day-to-day service that we provide. And of course, we have been trying to embark more on skills-based volunteering, where volunteers actually use their expertise to support the work that we do. And all these three types of volunteering are supported by individuals or corporates or community groups. They could be in either type of voluntary activities. So let me introduce you to some of our long-term partners. So I will start off with the individual profile. Madam Chiu, she has been with us since 2013. We have a group that we've formed up as an organization called Freedom Adventure Club. So the group start off as for the purpose of bringing our clients with disability out for outings, which because they may not have the opportunity as others, because to bring them out could be very difficult or challenging for their caregivers. So we want to enable them to experience outdoor fun as well. So Madam Shu started off as a volunteer in this volunteer group that we had. But when COVID came, we couldn't have activities. She still continued to volunteer as an individual in the different roles that we have in our center. And she is still volunteering today. So 2013 to that's almost 9 years of service with us. The roles that she has played, bringing clients for outings, helping out at center-based programs, and also even the back-end support such as when you have a coin donation collection, the box that we place at the various shopping malls or supermarkets, right? She'll help us to go and do the donation box collection. Sometimes she has also helped us to do in terms of cash counting as well. So these are the various roles that span across the three types, the ad hoc, the event-based, the service-based, and also the back-end type of volunteering support. Okay, next off, from individual, we go to a corporate. We have a long-term partner, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, who have been supporting us. They started off partnering us for the Purple Parade, and they always have sent their staff and to form a contingent together with SPD, and they have been partnering us since 2016 for the event-based Purple Parade activity. So what happens is over the years, for Purple Parade itself, they are very supportive to us in terms of, if you look at the bottom two pictures, right, they allow us to go to their office space, their lobby, to promote the event and then encourage their own staff to sign up for the event. And also beyond Purple Parade subsequently, right, they also started to volunteer with us in our center-based programs. So from 2018, they started to do regular their CSR at our day activity center. They come and do, play games with them, bring them for the community walks, community outings, be indoor, outdoor. And currently what they're doing is they are supporting us in terms of the lunchtime. So if you look at these two pictures, it's the community outings, right? So they will, or the center-based one, they will come in maybe a larger group, like 10 to 15 volunteers to come and support us. But over time, they also we came to ask them, maybe instead of always large group, right? Because like for example, our day activity center, the crunch time is always the lunchtime, meal time, when our staff have to do that meal preparation for our beneficiaries. So some of them, they cannot eat the food in large chunks, so we have to prepare, like cutting the things smaller, making into smaller portions, perhaps also help with feeding. So over time, we engage HPE and we ask them if they're willing to send maybe just a couple of staff, 2 to 3 staff, during their lunch hour, just for an hour to come and support us in this time, this crunch time that we need. And they were very willing to support us. So up till today, they come at least once a month in small groups, 2 to 3 of them, maybe 5 sometimes, to come just to help us during that lunchtime peak hour, which is very helpful for the program. And they also find that it's a very meaningful form of engagement. So this is where you see where a corporate, we first engage them in large scale events. Over time, they were also very willing to support us in the other forms of volunteering engagement. Another group that we have engaged for a long time is a community group, Soka. I think many of us would know them, Soka Gakkai Singapore. They started off volunteering at our day activity center from 2005 to 2016. So it was a good 11 years. They will come and sing songs about DAC clients, to do activity with them. So our clients really love them so much. So after 11 years, right, they decided to take a short break to maybe some of the members were also getting on engaged, and some maybe they wanted to try also another profile of group. So we had a mini send-off party for them also, but after a short while, after a short hiatus, they came back to us and they are now supporting another program in our organization, the senior daycare that we have. So doing similar type of volunteering assignments, such as going to the center and talking to the seniors, bringing them out for community outings. So it's a group that we had a long time partnership with, and we are very grateful for their support. Okay, the last group that we'd like to profile will be our professional skills-based volunteers. This is more recent. So we were very blessed that when we had My Culture, they are a professional counseling center who came and offer a pro bono counseling service for our staff, because one of their belief is that they believe that social service professionals, those that are giving help all the time, they also need help themselves. And this is a group that probably tend to be a little bit more neglected, because we are always giving, and then we don't have much to take care of us. So they offered to say that, okay, we want to give your staff pro bono counseling services. And it was during the start of the pandemic period where the staff was feeling maybe a bit more stressed when there was a lockdown period and all that. So their support came in very handy. So in addition to the pro bono counseling services that they gave us, this year, we also engaged them to do a bit more. Like, for example, we have lunchtime, lunch and learn series at our organization. We have engaged them to support us to give a talk in terms of mental resilience in one of the sessions. So this is how we have managed to engage them separately. And also currently, we are also having talks with them to see how else we can engage them in other areas. So what has worked for us as we think back? I think engaging the stakeholders are the key, what we say, all the preparation work. So who are the stakeholders? For us, we feel that a big stakeholder is our own internal programs, our own SPD program and colleagues. The other stakeholder, of course, are the volunteers. And a common thing that when we first embarked on trying to ramp up the VM work in SPD was that there is an importance of having a mindset change of both parties. Both our internal and our volunteers need to have that mindset change to be able to start this journey. So for our programs, one of the ways that they need to change is to plan to involve volunteers in the day-to-day aspects of service or program delivery. What I mean by plan is to be able to have specific roles for volunteers. So rather than, okay, let's have volunteer come and see where they can help. Instead of that, to talk to the programs as a VM, or we talk to the program and say, what are the specific areas that the volunteer can help, and plan that in. So even if the program is willing to try, are there things that they already plan to have volunteer involved? Like, for example, I need to bring 10 clients out for a community outing, but I'm not going to involve 5 staff. I will involve 2 staff, and I plan to get 3 volunteers to support me. So that's what we mean by planning. And it always helps to have friends, like dedicated program staff to front the volunteers. So dedicated program staff for each of the program that they have, it helps to have someone that the VM side, the VM person or the VM team can go to liaise with. It does make the logistics of it a lot easier. And related to that is reviewing the job scope and processes to sieve out aspects that can be done by volunteers. So we spend the time to talk to staff, talk to our program staff to ask them, okay, what is the, we break down, we sit down with them, break down the roles. What is the day-to-day role that you do as a staff? And when you break it up and see, are there parts that actually don't need a staff? We can actually engage a volunteer to do, so that the staff can focus on the more professional aspect or the more important aspects of the work. And also with that, getting the staff to feel comfortable to relinquish the work that can be done by volunteers, so they can focus more on the important work. So sometimes knowing is one thing, but finally letting go is also something that our colleagues may need to adjust to. So helping them to see that actually volunteering can come and support you in this. Why don't we try it out? You know, partnering, walking through with them how it can work. We can take small steps and try like 1 or 2 aspects first. And once they get comfortable, they will be more willing to sort of look at more areas that volunteers can help. And of course, again, similarly, finding a champion within the program to be your ally, it really works. It really helps. So like to have someone in there that believes that, hey, actually, yes, volunteers can really be a good resource to our program. So moving on. How do we do mindset change for volunteers? I think what we know that a similar issue that some of us face would be when we engage volunteers or groups, they prefer to have like ad hoc one time. I want to come in a big group, but sometimes we know that it is not so helpful for us. We always prefer regular volunteers. So this is something that we have started to really drill, like we started to just say upfront, we prefer for some more consistency in the volunteering. So how do we do that to make it easier for the volunteers to be able to accept that? You know, first thing we realized that it helps to create roles that are bite-sized. So like just now I mentioned the Hewlett Packard one, it's bite-sized because they come during their lunchtime. And it's just a 1 hour, just need 2 to 3 person. So they don't have to have the whole department come down. Their operations can still go on as normal. Just 2 or 3 people need to be away at each time. So it's bite size, and they find that it's easier logistically to manage. And we share the benefits of long-term partnership with them, like being upfront. Like for example, one of our roles we have is a classroom assistant for our early intervention program. So these are children below the age of 6, and they have special needs. And for those of us who know those children with special needs, it doesn't help if they keep seeing different people in the classroom day in, day out. So they benefit better from a consistent group of adults that they see each time they come for their intervention. So we share these benefits with them to say that, hey, look, this group actually do benefit when the person is consistent. And so we also tell upfront, we hope that, we can commit for at least one term, about 10 weeks. Then we share with them how it helps. Actually, if you partner, you come and you come consistently for this period of time, you also get to build that relationship with the beneficiary, and you do feel that it can be more meaningful for you as well. Also plan for activities that are multiple sessions. So for example, we do have a groceries distribution program. So we give groceries to the lower income families on a monthly basis. So when we engage corporate, we don't just say, okay, you help me, you come and distribute grocery for this month. We try to engage them for, oh, maybe can you come once a quarter or once in 4 months for the next year. So planning already ahead for multiple sessions, and actually some corporates do take it up and say, okay, can. So this time around, I think there's a question on how do we engage large numbers, right? So maybe they will say, I want to engage 100 people. So maybe each time you engage about 30. So throughout the year, you engage 100. So this is something, one of the ways we sell them. Then they, for those who think, yeah, can do it. So they will take on this as well. And can start small and build up. So for some corporates who they said, no, this is my first time, I just want to do one time and see how we'll be okay. Let's try that. But we do keep warm, so maybe we keep them engaged. Maybe like 3 months, 4 months, a little bit. There's something else. We say, hey, remember that time you help us in this? Would you be open to support us in another area? So, like for example, HPE, when we started, it was an annual event. Then when we try to engage them for other, they are more frequent. Once they get to know us, they will be a bit more comfortable to say, okay, let's try this. And of course, we always want to strive for win-win for both the volunteers and the program. So I think the unique position that the volunteer management team is on is you get to see both sides, because we also want to have volunteers come in and really support the program rather than cause them stress. We want the volunteers to come in to be able to benefit our clients. But at the same time, we also want the volunteering experience to benefit our volunteers so that they can feel that it is worthwhile, worth their time, worth their effort, worth their money. Because sometimes they do sponsor certain things, right? So that's what we always do. We always strive for a win-win situation for everybody. Of course, we can't do it 100%, but this is something that we always strive towards. So another way of partnering our stakeholders is actually our internal stakeholders are also very key in the success that we have seen so far. Firstly, from the top, from the board and management, I think for SPD, we are very blessed that the management had their corporate strategy to engage volunteers to augment staff work. It actually came from a point of, we're always having struggles with manpower. So that's where they decided to try to use the strategy of engaging more volunteers so that the staff can be freed up to do the more critical work. So that's one back of augmenting staff work. And they also took a decision 5 years ago to carve out a dedicated volunteer management small team to manage all these aspects of it. And of course, from the board, our lateral, right, our colleagues, our peers, a lot of time we do engage stakeholders synergistically. So for example, our fundraising team will say, hey, we have this donor who wants to volunteer. So these are the people that we won't be so quick to brush aside and say, hey, no, nothing for them to do. We will have to say, okay, they are our donors, right? So how do we deepen that relationship? So sometimes we do try to find and carve out something for the sake of engaging them a bit more. Then over time, we realize that it does pay off. When they say that, hey, okay, we are able to partner you to do certain things, they are more keen to partner us to do more in the future. And having a whole organization mindset. Back to HPE's example, right? Initially, for the Purple Parade, it was more of our advocacy team who was liaising with them for the event. But they don't just see it as, oh, this one is my advocacy team partner and nothing to do with VM. So it's having that whole mindset that all the staff are prepared to have. We say, hey, now I'm engaging this stakeholder for this. Can I engage this stakeholder for other things? Can I pull my VM colleagues in? Can I pull my fundraising colleagues in? So having that mindset does help so that you can see from the different touch points how you can engage them to be a volunteer, or from the volunteer, how can you engage them to do more. And of course, exploring new roles is something that we learned. Like for example, this recently we found one very interesting role that emerged was volunteer fundraisers. So is it fundraising or is it volunteer? You know, those now is the thing about crowdfunding and sharing your experience online is very popular. So but it's not our traditional way of how we classify a volunteer. So to us, they may be more of a fundraiser. But how do we look at the different angle whereby actually these are also our volunteers, because they spend their time to craft out their message, to craft out their story, so that it can help us gain awareness or help us to raise some funds. So how we see all these new roles and how we actually engage this group again together with our colleagues and the other touch points they have within the organizations. And of course, lastly, constant engagement with volunteers. We do have monthly newsletter that we blast out during the email blast. Those that like what are the activities that are upcoming, what are some volunteering opportunities that are available in the coming month. During COVID, we actually set up like a Facebook group to try to engage our volunteers, because for a period of time they were not able to work with us on many fronts because of the restriction. And we do have a yearly appreciation event as well. On the years during the last 2 years when we couldn't have on-site activity, we did things like we made gifts, we got some gifts for them and we mailed to them, or we delivered to some of them. And we also had did a video and we blast them. So we couldn't meet them personally, but we still thank them publicly for what they have done for us. And one of the things that we found very helpful, you know, earlier on when I mentioned that it's good to have an ally within your various program to partner you to engage volunteers more. It is also very helpful when you have that key volunteer or volunteer leader from that corporate or group that you're working with. Because for a few of the corporates that we work, we realize that having that key person and not having that key person really make a lot of difference. Having that key person will help you to push and help you to gather, help you to rah-rah their colleagues like in the corporate. For your side, you work with them, and then they also can share with you what are the needs, better share with you what are the needs of the corporate, so that we can also try to meet their objectives. So of course, training opportunities, we try to conduct trainings that are relevant for our volunteers. So for example, because we work with people with disability, one of the key training we have like wheelchair training. How do you manage a wheelchair? Basic disability awareness. How do you do befriending for a person with disability? So these are the basic courses that we run also that is made available for our volunteers. And lastly, I'd like to just share on what are the benefits that we have seen. So we are able to definitely do more with limited resources because of volunteer support. So one example is our shelter workshop. Previously, pre-COVID, when there are runs and they come and we do pack the goodie bag, the run bags for those large scale runs like Stand Chart Run and all that, right? Our beneficiaries itself who were there at the shelter workshop, our workshop trainees, they were not able to do that volume if we didn't have volunteers to come and help us. So every day, we have like 10 volunteers who come and pack alongside our beneficiaries, and it does help to speed up the whole process, and we are able to finish the job, because the job is a consignment job, so we get paid for it. So it's not like a volunteer job; it's a paid job. So we have volunteers to support us, so that we continue to have this type of assignments that comes into us. And of course, staff will be able to focus more on the professional work. So the type of work that can be done by volunteer, it takes the attention of them to do maybe the more mundane, the more basic level things, so that they can do more on maybe their planning, how to enhance the program and all that. And of course, one large benefit that we all know that a volunteer would be very much more likely to make a donation, to become your donor, rather than just a general member of public. So I think over time, with volunteering, it also will help in terms of the fundraising of the organization. So from here, you see the top picture you see here. We have outing that we bring our clients from the Day Activity Center out. We can see it's like one staff here and we have 3 volunteers. So this really helped us because rather than having to engage 2-3 staff or 3-4 staff out to bring this small group out, volunteers can help us to reduce that need for staff, and they can be our extra hands and legs to do a lot of things. Yeah, and of course, all these are corporates that we have worked with us, and they are corporate donors who became our volunteers. And then after, when they volunteer over the years, when we reach out to them for other form of sponsorship donation, they are very willing to consider also. So these are the benefits that we have reaped from our partnerships. So with that, I've come to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. Over to you, Brian.
Thank you so much, Keeling, for sharing with us your experience working, developing long-term sustainable volunteer partnership with various, either it's individual or with corporates or even grassroots organization. This is really inspiring sharing from you. I also really like the fact that you have so much grounded experience from the SSS perspective. This is going to tie in very nicely with what we're going to hear from Jamie later, who is going to share from the corporate perspective. Just a quick shout out. We have been seeing a lot of questions coming through on Slido itself. Thank you so much for keeping them coming through. For those of you who might not have actually had a chance to go on Slido, please scan the QR code or go to slido.com and enter the event code 9147376. That's 9147376 for the Slido event itself. So keep the question coming. After the panel discussion later, we will be answering as many questions as possible. And also a quick reminder, if you have a specific question for a specific speaker, please indicate who is it for so that we can direct that question to the speaker later. Right. Up next is actually Jimmy Ong. Mr. Jimmy Ong is actually the VP from the VP from the Global Public Affairs, who is with the corporate citizenship at Citi Singapore. And Jimmy is going to share with us 2 case studies on how Citi Singapore has achieved greater social impact with its SSA partner. I'm going to hand over to Jimmy. Over to you, Jimmy.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for everyone your attention. Yeah, maybe let me just share my slides first. Right. Okay. Yeah, being the third and the last speaker, I think I face 3 kinds of pressure. One is the attention span challenge, as well as then the second is that the time limit. And then the third is really about the bar is already set so high, right? So I'm just going to try my best. And hi, everyone. First, I must apologize for those who try to text me through the Zoom's chat function. I do not have on my work laptop the Zoom function, so I wouldn't know if anybody messaged me, so my apology for that. Let me first take the opportunity really to thank NCSS for the invitation to join all of you here today to be able to share some of Citi Singapore's experiences and perspective when it comes to volunteering partnership, especially on what are considered strategic to us. And I'm cognizant that our experiences and perspective may differ, but I do hope that there'll be some parts that you'll be able to contextualize and to apply and to support you in your own VM journey. So I will break my 20-minute sharing into 3 parts. The first will be a 3 to 5 minutes with a quick brief on what the organization does, the function that my team plays, and my role in the team. And then I will zoom into strategic volunteer partnership for the next 12-15 minutes to focus on 2 aspects really. One is what is strategic volunteer partnership and why the need for it, and followed by 2 examples on Citi's volunteer partnership experiences. And then I'll conclude with some thoughts. All right, so far so good. So let's zoom in. As a financial institution, Citi's mission really is to enable growth and economic progress through our core activities in safeguarding assets, lending money, making payments, and accessing capital markets on behalf of our clients. And we are founded as Citibank of New York in the 1800s, and we have more than 200 years of experiences helping our clients to meet some of the world's toughest challenges and also to embrace its greatest opportunities. And in 1902, we set up APEC branches in Hong Kong, in Manila, Kolkata, Shanghai, and Singapore. And this year we celebrate our 120 years of presence in these markets. And we know that when we do well in our business ethics and also in serving the community, we will make a positive financial as well as social impact in the community that we serve. We'll be able to earn and elevate the public's trust in us as a global bank. And we are really honored to be among the only 25 organizations in Singapore to be conferred the Champions of Good national recognition for every rendition of the award since it was launched by the National Volunteer and Philanthropy Center, NVPC in short. Right, so in Citi, our corporate citizenship efforts are really stewarded under the Global Public Affairs function. And these are some of the key areas of work that we do at GPA, and corporate citizenship being one of them. I lead the Citi's corporate citizenship efforts in Singapore, and they revolve around designing and implementing different initiatives in each of these areas. It can be from supporting charitable contribution, which is like making donation, right? Charitable events, to guiding or advising on employee-led fundraisers, looking into advocacy campaigns for certain social causes like disability inclusion, for example, women empowerment and such, right? And it can be about managing grant programs that is funded by Citi Foundation in the US, with certain global focus that what Priscilla mentioned during her presentation, right? That there's a global mandate for different organizations, especially those MNCs, a few MNCs that follow a global area of focus. And then lastly, but not the least, on volunteerism. And the reason why I'm sharing with you the other areas of corporate citizenship work is really because that more often than not, many of these initiatives that we have, it started out as volunteer opportunities that we have with the community partners. So while volunteerism is one of the many platforms of doing good, the volunteer management practitioner play a very critical role in opening potential doors to further collaborations and resources for his or her SSAs. And VMPs, the practitioners, they play this pivotal role in not just securing strong pipelines of volunteer to support the charities, but also cementing corporate partnerships through volunteering opportunities to go deeper and stronger with the charities in other areas, such as like fundraising and advocacy that we talk about. All right. In Citi, we have an employee-driven recreation club, which we call Citi Club Singapore. And there are many multiple committees that set up under Citi Club Singapore to run various employee engagement initiatives. And one of those is really focused on organizing volunteering opportunities. And there's an annual renewal of the Citi Club committee to ensure that there are always opportunities for interested colleagues to serve the community as part of the club, right? So there are different different types of volunteering partnership that Citi has with various SSAs. And largely it's because of our very broad-based employee base. We have about 8,500 in Singapore. I mean, I recognize that not all they will volunteer, but there are many, because of the broad base, we need to have different kinds of opportunities ready. So we have ad hoc one-off volunteer opportunities to cater to colleagues with limited availability, as well as regular volunteering for those who find meaningful and would like to serve beyond a one-off basis. So for example, one-off, it could be like blood donation drive, it could be a beach cleanup, versus say visits to girls' homes with HCSA Day Spring program. We have both volunteering opportunities on virtual platform versus, and this really comes to like and gain in scale during COVID. I'm sure that's the same for many of the organizations that they pivot online as well in order to continue volunteering, right? As well as on-site volunteering. So example is like virtual career mentoring program that we have with the Advisory Singapore for many years, and in school versus like in school mentoring program that we have with Halogen Foundation. Right, we have volunteer opportunities that allow colleagues who find meaningful to organize community events, and those that tap on their skill sets, their domain expertise. So just like organizing, say, year-end celebration, New Year celebration, for example, Christmas party in a community setting, versus say volunteering as consultants in the area of branding, business development, AI, user experience to like a group of social innovators, youth, so really just different kind of volunteer opportunity out there. So before we zoom into strategic volunteer partnership, I thought that it's really important that we first consider what it is, right? We don't want to use the term frivolously without truly understanding what it means. So when we say strategic volunteer partnership, we mean to say either or both of the following: that there is a contribution to your organization's or your team's goal through this partnership, or that the partnership is marked by a strategy, which is actually an action plan that's designed to achieve that specific goal. So when you are considering to approach an organization to explore strategic volunteer partnership, you may like to consider the following. So in the past, I used to think strategy and being strategic, wow, they are really big and complex words. At the start of the today's session, Brian ran a survey, right? And like, what your impression of a strategic volunteer partnership? What does it come to you? What words, right? I saw like complex and such, and that's true. So when you're considering to approach an organization, I think these are important considerations. First is really, instead of looking at those organizations, first is that, are you clear on your own organization's goal or your team's goal, and how this volunteer partnership that you're proposing to a certain corporate, for example, will contribute or move forward or further those goals. And second part, really based on the definition I've shared, right? That do you have, or are you able to draw up an action plan that's designed to achieve that purpose? So give an example, right? So for Citi, we advocate for diversity and inclusion as an organization. And one of the causes that we champion as an organization is disability inclusion. So a couple of months ago, SSA serving persons with special needs met my Citi Club colleague and me to share about their work. What started as a meeting then became opportunistic. A colleague from another department came and approached me to share that, hey, there's a regional leadership gathering in one of the business teams that's coming in September. And the team hopes to be able to serve the community together, as part of that program. And guess what? I rang up this SSA. We partnered them to organize a wellness day with the beneficiaries. And so that happened in mid-September. And this partnership, one-time partnership, soon gained strategic value, because with that positive volunteering experience, the one-off, we are now then planning to cater refreshment from them for our internal events in October to raise awareness on disability inclusion, and at the same time contribute monetarily to the beneficiaries' work. And on top of that, we are also engaging more colleagues to journey with them in the coming Purple Parade that has been talked about, in both presentation, Priest and as well as SPD's presentation in this coming end October to champion disability inclusion. See here, there is a contribution to Citi's goals in championing disability inclusion, and to engage employees in serving in the community. And there's an action plan in place to do that. And when I say action plan, Citi itself, there is different areas of action plan to champion disability inclusion. So when opportunity comes on that, it kind of enhance or further that goal, right, of championing disability inclusion, of engaging employees in this space. And the thing that I want to say is this also, that not all partnerships are strategic from the onset, from the beginning. They can happen sporadically, they can happen opportunistically, maybe because you receive a random call with a request to volunteer with a SSA, or that your colleague refers an organization, introduce you an organization that he is currently serving in his personal capacity. But the point that I want to make is this, that to focus on making your volunteering partnership strategic. So it can be either intentional from the beginning, or to turn those existing sporadic and opportunistic ones into strategic ones that contribute to your organization's goals. Priscilla is very kind to help me with a preview, which I didn't request, but it's really good. That set the stage, sharing about one of the partnership that we have with the YMCA of Singapore, who have been very good partner with City for so many years, over 2 decades, in fact. So we partner in this community initiative called the YMCA Youth for Causes, which then oversee this 18-year partnership between City and YMCA from 2003 to 2020. So basically, in short, the program provides 100 teams of youth with the platform to raise public awareness, raise funds, engage volunteers for social service agencies that this 100 teams of youth has decided to adopt their own choice, right? And throughout this partnership, what makes it really a win-win, the longevity, the reason behind the longevity of the partnership, I brought it down to a few of these following points. And large part has got to do with the volunteer management. Apart from the design of the actual program itself, the volunteer management plays really a key role in ensuring like the positive VM journey throughout, from volunteer recruitment to retention, to engagement to retention. So I'll give you an example. So part of the program is to organize, to recruit volunteers, corporate volunteer mentors for the 100 teams of youth. YMCA, they took to have that dedicated volunteer management team to organize mentors briefing. They produce mentors handbook, and not just to send them the hard copy or the soft copy, but they make it available online for the public to download, for the volunteers to download. They form mentor support group for new volunteers, new volunteer mentors. And they recognize and appreciate volunteers during the finale event. And, I hear quite a few parts regarding volunteer appreciation, in the past 2 presentations. And I want to say this as well regarding that. Many times volunteer, or if not all, most of them, they join really because they want to give. They want, and not because of a volunteer, so that at the end of the program that they receive a token, a gift, or free appreciation dinner. I mean, those are really nice gesture, but beyond that is because of their intrinsic desire to want to give, right? So appreciating volunteer need not always take the form of something that must be costly. It can be as simple as during the finale event that we list their name, out, and then have them to stand up during the event to recognize their contribution, or to write to their leaders within their organization to share of their contribution, to thank them. Those are small little gestures that I think they will appreciate as well. I want to share, so at the end of the program, sorry, I lost track. The volunteer management practitioner, they also email the volunteers to invite them on board for the next one, the next run of the program as well. So that is got to do with retention. And as different volunteers have varying interests and bandwidth for volunteering, the YMCA volunteer manager, they were able to look into volunteering roles, to redesign and scope out meaningful roles to engage the city volunteers in this program with various types of volunteering opportunities. For senior leadership, for example, to contribute in some of the program's subcommittees to drive at the directions of the program. For city colleagues who can only afford, say, one-time commitment to contribute as part of the judging panels for the program. And those who are interested to, say, involve their business clients, their partners, to also join them on the program to volunteer as judges together. And that helps in even building that kind of business relationship with the clients and partners. And for those who prefer, say, regular volunteering to contribute as volunteer mentors, the partnership grew in trust over time. And as a result, really because of how the volunteer managers are able to respond to feedback over regular check-in sessions. So if you have programs with corporates, I think it'll be helpful to always set aside. It need not be very frequent, but regular check-in sessions for feedback from both ways, to so that you can continue to keep the relationship warm, not just transactional in a sense, right? And for those who may be curious, why do we end the partnership in this program with YMCA if it's working so well for both organizations? While we end the partnership in the program because of the need to redirect our resources to address other community needs, the strong partnership with YMCA continues. In fact, we are now partnering them to champion disability inclusion and to strengthen, say, youth employability in a separate program. And we're discussing ways to scope out meaningful roles for city volunteers to contribute to the program. To the second example is the example of our volunteering partnership with Halogen Foundation through its NIFTY program. NIFTY stands for Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship. And this program really is designed to activate the entrepreneurial mindset and build business skills in youth from underserved community. So in this program, facilitators and corporate volunteers come alongside the students during in-curriculum time in school to coach them on the different units of the already prepared NIFTY program curriculum, such like topics like market research, financials, and about coaching them in their presentation skills as well. So we have been volunteering in this program since 2018, and one of the key reasons for the continued partnership is really about Halogen Foundation's strong volunteer management. And credit to the volunteer management team. Every year, I share with you about City Club Singapore, the committee will be refreshed with new committee members joining. So the VM team in Halogen Foundation always ensure that the incumbent committee overseeing the volunteer coordination of the NIFTY program will connect Halogen Foundation with City Club's successor, the new batch that's coming in. And volunteer managers will always take proactive approach in updating City, for example, in the details of the upcoming volunteer opportunities, so that our volunteer coordinators, our colleagues who are overseeing this, will have the ample time to recruit volunteer for the program. And this was shared actually in the previous presentation as well, that I think one of the key challenges in a corporate setting is, especially in the larger corporate, it's not the issue about finding volunteers, but having enough time to recruit them, right? So if you have your program that you're looking for corporate volunteers, having already set dates for those volunteering opportunities and making them known with ample time, turnaround time, that really will help in finding up, partnering corporates. And lastly, the volunteer manager will also make the effort to even provide City with short post-event write-ups. So they linked up, for example, with their comms, corporate affairs team, teammates to share a short write-up, post-program, post-events write-up with accompanying photos for City to share internally and sometimes externally as well. And they would, the SSAs themselves will also sometimes post on their own social media platform. And I think all this makes that difference, that 1 degree difference, that in the long run, it really helps strengthen and continue keep that continuity within the partnership. It raises awareness. So basically, the SSA is helping the corporates to help themselves, in a sense, in making volunteer recruitment easier with greater awareness among the colleagues. So I think before I end, I just like to leave some food for thoughts for all our volunteer management practitioner here. It is really important that before you approach any organization to explore partnership, that you are clear of your organization's goal in corporate engagement. What do you want to see through engaging this specific corporate? How does it further your goals, your proposed volunteer partnership? How can it contribute to those goals? Know what your organization has to offer, and then prospect the corporates that supports your organization's causes. And that is also one of the things that Priscilla, I remember, if I remember correctly, that you talk about some of the feedback you have from SSAs, about having difficulty finding corporates that align. Maybe from the onset, you should be prospecting corporates that are already aligned to your organization's causes, right? Next, when exploring a SVP, take time to learn about the corporate's volunteering needs, the key decision makers, what are the available opportunities within their corporate setting, which are the easiest to kickstart so that you can get a foot in the door. For example, so City, we are very large on, say, women empowerment, and during, say, International Women's Day, IWD in March, there's a dedicated committee that will go out there to look for opportunity for partnership. It can be speaking engagement, it can be about volunteering to in this space as well. So if your organization that is within that space, there's an opportunity for you. December, beginning of December, there's UN International Day for persons with disability. And when there are corporates that are looking to serve during that period, hey, this is opportunity for SSAs who are in that space as well. So there's so many other examples that I can cite, but I think you get a point, right? Next, be realistic. Sometimes that there may not be an immediate opportunity to work together, but I want to say that receiving a no may not necessarily means an indefinite no. It may be not yet, right? Like, for example, I cited at the beginning, right? I met the SSA staff just to hear them about their work, what the opportunity with them. But at the moment, there wasn't any. And that following week, it so happened that there's a demand for such an opportunity. I contacted them. So I think the learning from this really is that keep the relationship with your pipeline of potential partners warm, keep them updated with major volunteering developments in your SSAs. And lastly, when you are in a SVP, okay, think big, start small, and act and learn fast, right? Give the partnership and the volunteer a vision so that you can captivate their imagination on what and where this SVP can grow towards. Demonstrate that you are in control of things as the SSA, as the organizing key person, POC, for example. And it is always okay to pilot things in smaller settings, smaller scale, especially at the beginning of new partnerships. And finally, demonstrate your ability to mobilize volunteers to plan and execute programs efficiently, being able to reflect the learning from any setbacks along the way. This demonstration of your volunteer capabilities will help in really building the necessary trust. So trust is not just in the heart, the feeling, but it's also in the head, in seeing the demonstration of all these capabilities, right? In building to widen and to deepen that partnership that your SSA has with the corporate. So with that, thank you for your time. I'll pass the time back to Brian.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. Thank you so much for sharing from your perspective how City Singapore has been doing all this engagement, building meaningful partnership with our SSA in Singapore. Particularly like how you emphasize that it is about the consistency, it's about the good volunteer management that can build trust between you and the SSA partner. So really also getting the SSA to think about how they can continuously engage volunteers, also redesigning some of the roles so that it can be always refreshing for the volunteer to come on board to volunteer in those partnerships as well. Thank you so much, Jimmy. And so thank you again once again to all our three speakers for your wonderful insights and also sharing your personal experience on how to create and sustain long-term strategic volunteer partnership. And I'm sure many of our participants, I'm already seeing very active chats in the chat window itself, and also in the Q&A panel itself in the Slido. There's lots of questions, lots of ideas on how they can also do similar wonderful partnership in their own work as well. Now, before we get the speakers back on screen for our next segment, which is a panel discussion, we want to show a short video clip. We want to share with you a short video clip itself. Now, many of you will know that Volunteer Management Network is not just a platform for us to learn and share best practices. It is also a platform for us to celebrate your work as volunteer managers. So we're going to show you a short video clip, about 4 minutes, and this clip itself showcases our volunteer managers, how engaging our volunteers in a structured and intentional way, how you have been able to do that. It features one of our fellow volunteer manager. This is Serene Chen from Philos Community Services. And it's also, this video is really also about the importance of volunteer managers in your role, in your importance of your role as a catalyst in your organization to drive volunteerism, to help support and improve service delivery, and also help to transform the growth of your SSA. Serene's story is also about the importance of building volunteer partnership and how it can create long-lasting impact for our service users, staff, and volunteers. Right? A great shout out for Serene. I think she might be in the room. I can say hi to her. And let me just pull out the video that we're going to share with you. Just bear with me if the audio is not loud enough. You may want to adjust your volume in a while. Right, feel free to let me know if the volume is actually not doing well. Okay. Oh, it's seeing there. Okay.
I think sometimes there's the stereotype or the misconception that volunteers are just there to plug gaps. Wherever you need them, you just put them there. But actually, we need to understand what it is that they find fulfilling so that we can give them a role that allows them to find meaning and also allows them to better help the beneficiaries. So our Chinese name is actually Tian You. Tian like sky, You like friend. I'm Serene. I'm the volunteer manager at Philos. A lot of people don't know what volunteer manager does. So basically what we do is we recruit, interview, find a suitable volunteer for each role, and then engage them along the way on their volunteering journey with Philos. I was in the civil service for close to 8 years before this. Typically, to make the switch from civil service to social service does surprise some people. But for me, it's something that I knew I was always going to do. Unlike what most people think, social work is not the only entry point into social service. And for myself, working in recruitment, marketing, outreach work, this skill set translates very well to the role of a volunteer manager, and this is how I can best contribute.
So today is really more of an informal chat, so to get to know you a little bit better.
Different volunteers come in with different motivations. We will interview them to understand what they want to achieve so that we can give them a role that allows them to find meaning and also allows them to better help the beneficiaries. For example, if I'm recruiting someone for the reading room program, I would be looking for someone with interest to work with kids and want to help them grow. The person must have certain level of English language competency and possess a certain energy level as well, because to engage kids is not easy. So these are some of the things that we'll look out for. Yeah. I actually grew up in a low-income family. My parents did not have much of a formal education, so they weren't able to read storybooks to me at night, and I grew up in a very predominantly Chinese-speaking environment. So when I entered primary school, I couldn't really speak English. I think the most memorable experience is probably my first day of primary school. I just remember myself as a 7-year-old standing in front of the entire class, trying to ask to go to the toilet. I was just repeating myself in Chinese to my teacher, and my teacher couldn't speak Chinese, so she was just staring at me blankly, hoping that I translate myself. It felt like forever before a classmate actually stood up and very kindly translated for me. To me, I feel that it must have been quite traumatizing when I was a kid for me to actually remember it till this day as my first day of school. So I feel like I can relate to some of the challenges that the children and the families face. I would like to be in a role that allows me to help a child like me or a family like mine. As a volunteer manager, I actually don't like it when people think of volunteers as free resource. A lot of programs on the ground today cannot run without volunteers, and we serve thousands of beneficiaries. I think they are very invaluable. Volunteers can tell when you invest your time and effort in them, and you don't just treat them as someone to plug the gap. We try to equip them with the skill sets that they need to serve better. So this includes training sessions, for example, befriending training or storytelling training, etc. It also motivates them, I think, to do better in their role. And when they face challenges, they feel more encouraged to actually come to you to ask for advice. What gives me the greatest satisfaction is knowing that the volunteers that we brought in were able to help meet our beneficiaries' needs. This can very well be helping a child learn to read or helping a senior feel less lonely through befriending. I see my role as being more indirect by having a very definite impact. This belief is what motivates me to keep going.
Right, thank you, Serene, so much for sharing that the very inspiring story and your work in Philos. She's in the room, so feel free to reach out to her and say hi. And if you are actually interested in the, sorry, give me a second. If you are actually interested in the clip or you want to use this clip to, to explain to people what you do as a volunteer manager, you can also go on to the Facebook page of our grandfather stories. The story is already up there on the Facebook page itself. We will also send you the link so that you don't have to hunt for it online as well. All right, so thank you so much for taking time with us and watching the video and hearing our speakers so far. What we're going to do next is actually going to invite our speakers, our three speakers, Priscilla, Keeling, and Jimmy, to join us back online so that we can actually have our panel discussion with you. Yep, got everyone online here. Thank you so much. We're going to keep this panel discussion short since there's a lot of wonderful questions that is already coming through from the audience. And maybe let's start off with the first question I think many of us have in mind, and some of you have already touched on it in your own respective presentation itself. Maybe I can start off with Keeling, right? Having to work through with different corporates and also develop long-term strategic partnership itself. What are some of the key benefits you would say that the long-term partnership actually brought to SPD?
I think, as mentioned earlier, the key benefits is they really do support us in terms of what we do, and it allows our staff to be able to expand on what they do. So, for example, where without volunteers, certain things cannot be done or cannot be done as well. So I think the volunteers have is that extra source of support for us, and of course, more holistically, in terms of the partnership that they have, with them when they volunteer long enough with us, they naturally are our advocates for our message on advocating for people with disabilities. So they are natural advocates. So the byproducts are them speaking in terms of issue, being more knowledgeable, sharing, and of course the other part, the dollars and cents part, is donors. They tend to make better donors because they have that relationship with us. So overall, it's all the benefits that I would say we have reaped from the long-term relationships.
Yeah. And there's one particular example that you've shown in your presentation earlier on with My Culture. I think most of the time when people think about volunteering, it's really thinking about volunteer serving or assisting the service users or the clients. Very rarely people think about volunteers able to come in to help the staff itself. Can you say a bit more about that arrangement?
I think we also are mindful of improving our organization as a whole. So because we are so used as SSA, we are so used to doing a lot of helping works to benefit the beneficiaries, right? But we also we also tend to forget that sometimes when as an organization we grow, and with times, we are not so quick as perhaps in the non-profit, in the for-profit sector, that we have that ability back end to do certain things. So I think more and more we are looking at skills-based to help us to beef up that aspect so that as an organization we perform better, so we can do better for the people that we serve. So my culture was one. Actually, during the pandemic, our HR was already thinking of how we can support our staff. We've been like giving them maybe giving them care packs. We even set up our little own committee of you can come to us for counseling. But I think staff to staff is still a bit of a awkwardness there. They don't want to talk to another staff. So when my culture came, it was really timely. And I think also kudos to my HR team when we connected. They really worked very fast because there was an MOU and all that. So we really worked very fast to try to connect. So I think one of the lessons we learned is sometimes opportunity, like Brian has shared, as Jimmy has shared, you don't plan for it, but they just come. But it's up to us of how we want to really grab it and make something happen. So we are just thankful that it dropped in our laps in a way, and then we were able to have that partnership with my culture.
This is quite timely, right? To have such service rendered to your staff as well.
Correct.
Yeah. Maybe my similar question to Jimmy, from a perspective of the corporate, right? How has long-term strategic partnership helped yourself in your role, as well as also City Singapore?
There are many aspects to it in terms of the benefits that it brings. I think for one, for sure, is continuity. When I say continuity, I think it enables us to, and then the second is up the scale, to scale up our impact in doing good. So because when a partnership continues over a certain years, there is that trust, that track record, right? And like both organizations already know what you're looking for in their volunteering opportunity, in their partnership, and you're able to do more together and do deeper work, not just more. So it's not more of the same, but when you're exploring, the first thing that comes to your mind is, okay, how about I explore this with the partner? So there are opportunities to scale things up. So that's in terms of doing more, but it can be more impactful as well. That means going to do deeper work. And the example of the City Club renewal, every year the committee change, right? That you are able to ensure continuity year after year. And that continues to keep the door open to like potential collaborations outside of volunteering between your organization and us. So I think for us, we see great value in that. And I mean, I'm talking to SSAs, right? We all know, and I came from SSA setting as well, actually, that really impact is not made overnight or even over a year, or, you know, it takes time. So to do that, you need runway, right? You need time. So it's important to keep a partnership not just as one-off. It can start as one-off, but it's good to continue that, right? Thank you.
I think you drive home a really important point earlier on about starting small, building the trust, building the rapport, and I think that's really helpful. Maybe I go to Priscilla on one point that you briefly talk about wrapping around the organization needs in itself, the partnership itself. Can you explain a bit more about this wrapping around organization needs?
I think traditionally, I think we have always, done a lot of service-based partnerships where, there are, volunteers and volunteer partnerships courted, to really help to, do the befriending and also maybe food packing, to help on the services, which continues to be important. But increasingly in our sector, we are seeing really more and more charities, like what Healing shared, they're really kind of like pushing new frontiers, really in taking a very holistic approach in driving their volunteer management efforts, going beyond wrapping around the services, which we have always been doing so, increasingly doing well over the decades. But we do see pushing of new frontiers and entering into new terrains when they actually take it, as the whole of organization approach. Meaning to say that there are strategic needs and outcomes that the whole organization, are striving to achieve beyond services. There are, as part of the board retreat with between the boards and the senior management, they do talk about perhaps, what do they want to drive in terms of their digitalization needs, in terms of their marketing needs, is there a need to revamp website, do better in social media, and these are where the skills-based volunteerism that both Jimmy and Keeling talk about, where if our volunteer manager are also putting on a very strategic thinking hat beyond the operational part that we all still need to do, because the essential services need to carry on, they cannot be dropped. But if they are stretching their broadening their mindset and stretching their minds to also also pull in when they pitch to a corporate, a very holistic frame of differing needs. You'll be very surprised that sometimes we have seen corporates, actually saying that, okay, I will take this program and I'm happy to do 6 months to 1 year and I will schedule my volunteers around your, the program needs. But at the same time, I got another department with a few hundred people, actually, maybe I could, dedicate 10 or 20 staff, perhaps maybe to come and take on your digitalization, skills-based volunteerism. And we really have many of such examples where JP Morgan has gone with, together with New Hope Community Services to take on the digitalization, skills-based volunteerism on top of donating laptops and doing the digital literacy. They do help the organization to grow stronger in their digitalization journey as well. And we have also Goldman Sachs, for example, with a Caregiver Alliance, helping to revamp their website and making it better. So I think that's something that we hope that increasingly we can push New Frontiers in courting strategic volunteer partnerships to wrap around the whole organization's needs.
I think that's very much in line with the trends in volunteerism, where people no longer just want to spend a 1 day off. They want to see how their hours are also creating impact in the organization that they are volunteering with. Maybe I have a question for Keeling. This might be slightly different from what I might actually preempt you with. In your slides itself, you have two halves, right? One is for volunteer, one is for internal, some of the program staff itself. And I think some of our past experience hearing from the volunteer managers that sometimes the volunteers might be easier to motivate in the mindset change itself. It's often the internal staff might require more work. Can you say a bit more on your own experience, how you can motivate your own program staff in working with you to create and meet those needs with a long-term partnership?
I think our own journey was that at the bottom line, we try to find our common goal, which is, I think, one that we can align is we want to do good for the people we serve. So as long as that North Star is correct, right? The rest, we try to say, okay, we understand it's very difficult, because I think when they're brought down in the day-to-day work, asking them to make changes is tough. So being there to work with them. So initially when we started that, right, we even had our VM go down and shadow what they do. So we tell them, okay, we shadow you. Then from an external person's perspective, we see that actually, I'm not trained to do your work, but I can do this. So if I can do means likely volunteer can also do. Do you want to try? So giving that working along with them and showing them that the ultimate goal is for the betterment of our people that we serve. And I think that really helps lah. Then of course we have people who are more keen, programs who are less keen because they may have having other priorities. I think that's fine. We focus first on those that are a bit more ready. So it's also there's a rippling effect with when other programs say this one, hey, this one can do, so maybe I would also like to try. So I think that's where we start lah.
So it's also more, even internally, you do have to do it progressively in terms of shifting the mindset.
Yeah,
okay.
The initial is always a bit tougher. Yeah.
Maybe Jimmy, I ask you another question. This is related to, I think in sometimes the SSA might not be aware that even if they meet up with the corporate representative, the corporate representative also have to sort of build a case in order to garner support internally. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, thanks for sharing. It is true. So I just give you that context setting, right? So in the public sector or in the social service sector, the people sector, what you're doing is the core business. The doing good is the core business. But in a private sector, in a corporate setting, the doing good part is very important, but yet it is but a function of the organization. So not that there are no good doers. In fact, there are so many good doers, but it's not embedded as part of their business agenda, right? So then my role in driving CSR or corporate citizenship really is then how do I not just, I hope you don't mind me speaking in Mandarin here, not just 真正做, not just 持续做, but is to 聪明做, which is to how do you do it smartly to embed the doing good agenda into each of the business, right? How will that help them in their bonding as a team, for example, to do good together as a team? How would it help them in their client relationship? So I give you an example, right? So we support the Business Time Budding Artist Funds every year with donation, but beyond donation, one of the business wanted to engage them to do more, to do deeper. So instead, we talk to them, we say, hey, under this group, your beneficiaries, they are artistically so talented. How can we showcase their talent and at the same time increase that relationship with our clients? So the business every year, they print calendars for their clients. So we say, hey, how about in your calendar and your Chinese New Year ang pao, you commission the beneficiaries to design for your clients, all this, the ang pao and the calendar. They say, okay, let's do that. And then they did that for so many years, and now they use the design and implement it year on year, just something different. Like last year, it was about AR, using AR. So beyond just like visual, you're able to explore the AR part when you look at the calendar, and all these are designed, and these are like talking point to raise awareness on the beneficiaries, BTBAF, and it draws the client closer together with Citi. So I think it's how do we then find embed that doing good into the business agenda.
Thanks, Jimmy, and that's really insightful on how from a corporate lens, what are some of the key things the SSA can help you to get the business case across. Maybe I'll go to Priscilla for my last question before we go to the Q&A from the rest. I'm sure in your work, as well as the team members' work, you work a lot with small, medium-sized, and large SSAs. They have very diverse capacity, capability on engaging corporate partners or community groups in doing long-term volunteer partnership itself. Say a bit more in your opinion. What is some of the things that the smaller or medium-sized SSA can think about when they develop a long-term partnership? Because I think many of our SSA partners here are from the smaller ones, so maybe their experience can be, or the resources can be quite different from the large ones.
Yeah. I think for our smaller SSAs, I think definitely we will need more help on hand. I think whether it's in terms of creating awareness or is it in terms of the different services. Maybe the smaller SSAs would perhaps, as we define it, maybe the number of service users could be perhaps less because of maybe, let's say a Singapore Cancer Society, understandably we have a larger population of people they need to serve versus, let's say, maybe stroke support station or maybe some other, they may be smaller. But that being said, I think not limited by the numbers of people that they serve. I always think that there's always a layer on that we could still build up, even if it's a smaller group of people that we serve, which means to say that they then need to also garner for such corporate partnerships and be able to provide different interaction, befriending opportunities, and not necessarily, say, for example, digital literacy could be other kind of skills that we could also impart. So to your point, I think all the more they would need maybe a very concerted volunteer partnership strategy. And I love the question that was actually in the Slido, and don't mind if I just jump into one of the question. I thought one of the question was quite brilliant, as in to ask about, sometimes corporates do ask charities to help to organize events, and if it's a small SSA, it's really quite tough. Of course, so that question I thought was really spot on. I think the way to then be able to tend towards such requests is, of course, ideally changing of the mindset to, explore and give them options and ideas on how actually they could be the one to perhaps take the lead if they can, because that's where the supply of volunteers come in, and actually we would be happy to be able to support and journey alongside, to be receiving the support and help and advocacy and befriending services that then we could then be the one to do the channeling to then the specific programs. So I thought that would be, of course, a mindset shifts, and there will be a lot of different models that we have seen a lot of corporates do, and I'm happy to take that separate conversations with anyone if need. There's a UOB Heartbeat Run. It's all run by UOB staff, and they really cleverly get all the MDs of every single department, and they have like 40-something MDs in the whole UOB group. They literally bring all of them into a certain kind of committee, and then every department will have to be activated for UOB Heartbeat Run to be done in such a big scale of a few thousand people every year, run and walk. And then the charities and our charities will be there actually to set up booths just to create awareness within the carnival and be able to plug in that way. And there's also SGX Blue Charge, same thing also where, it's actually powered and run by staff volunteers. So I think increasingly if our SSAs, whether smaller SSAs, medium and large, if they are able to get better at change management, to get better at moral suasion, come with the content, come with the models that they have seen and quote maybe some of them and share it, with certain corporates, I think that will really help them to draw in regardless, even if they are SSAs and smaller SSAs, but the corporate, even if it's a big partner, actually can see and tell and feel that, hey, this volunteer manager, wow, really knows his or her staff, wow, talking in the same language as we're talking also, like UN SDG, and how you can give some indicators, and give some very good ideas on how to also make the staff so satisfied with the volunteering experience, be able to track it, be able to comms it out. I think you have given a really good partnership experience, regardless of small, medium, but I think it really boils down to what Jimmy said. The volunteer manager is really key to making magic happen and making the partnership come true. Yeah. So
sorry, Brian, if I may jump in on
Go
this.
ahead. Yes.
Yeah. So I bring it back to Keeling's just now in her presentation. She shared about there's a request on corporate to engage 100 volunteers, for example, and how she counter proposed to say, hey, can we engage 30 in this and 30 in that, and then over the whole of the year you can engage that 100 or something. So I think there's two sides to it. One is that there is the VM part who think a different model to how to satisfy a certain request, but there's also the corporate side who need to make a combination, a willingness to do that. Yeah, so I think it takes both ways. So for example, in City, right, every June, we have this thing called the Global Community Day, GCD in short. So it's using the whole period of May and June to organize lots of, on top of the regular round the year volunteering, to have lots of volunteering events during that 2 months for the whole of like City Singapore and cities offices around the world. So we recognize that, I shared that with our employee base, it's impossible to organize one big event, right? So instead, what we did is that through City Club, we said that, hey, you try to engage as many SSAs as possible to offer their opportunity. But on top of that, to each of the business group, let them have their community lead to co-organize, to go out there on their own. You prepare the budget for them. You let them go and find and source opportunity on their own as well. So I think within a corporate, there is also a need to accommodate and make setting so that you're able to fulfill that goal, as a corporate. So I think it takes both sides. But coming back to both the SSA as well as the corporate, I think there's first there must be a basis of it's a match, meaning to say that, hey, this is what my organization is advocating for. This is a corporate that I really want to partner strategically. And first with that match, then you go into exploring opportunity. Because then there'll be a willingness, right? Thank you.
Yeah, Jimmy, that's a wonderful point about how the corporates also need to develop their own internal structure and mechanism to fulfill your own volunteer needs as well. I think that question would be also appropriate to bring up to Keeling now. You mentioned on how you respond to requests for once-off large-scale volunteer events. This came from a question also, which is really very taxing and it can be not that suitable for your own organization or clients. How do you usually respond to such a request?
Okay, to be very honest, when we really cannot accommodate, we just tell them honestly, like, look, we are not able to accommodate such a large number. And okay, when we talk about, like, for example, pre-COVID, we did have one event which was about 100 over volunteers in our center, in our center. So, but because that was also one of our long-term big donor as well. So I think we have to look at strategically who are the partners, and sometimes we do have to make accommodation if you want to maintain that relationship. And that particular event had all the big shots of the company come down, their chiefs and all that. So we had to make that happen. So this is where we work with our partner, our internal stakeholders, our program managers and all that, to say, hey, this is not a VM thing, this is an SPD thing. They are our long-term partner, let's all make it work. So I think that's one way. But of course, sometimes we do say that we cannot accommodate this, but how about we do this instead? And then we try to come to like a compromise to say that, okay, I think maybe we try to scale for this one. We still have a larger scale type, but maybe a smaller scale than what they imagine. Then after that, we have a series. So knowing what they want, sometimes the corporate, let's say they have like that, something like a global kind of CSR day kind of thing, right? They probably also just want to have that platform to encourage their staff. and with that platform to showcase that this is beyond the day-to-day business, this is what we want to do to contribute. So I think the bottom line is we give them the opportunity to showcase what they need, and that there are room for negotiation. I very much agree with Jimmy to say that, of course, on the corporates, and they must be willing to also partner us first and be willing to make that accommodation. So it's a lot of nuances. Like you just have to see, and one corporate differs from another. So you really have to see case-to-case basis.
We have, sorry, Jimmy, go ahead.
No, and to add on to that, right, I think it's also about that when you are able to put the expectations on the table from both sides, that's when real trust happens, right? Really, sometimes it's about setting expectation when you're able to communicate candidly. It is instead of like you being afraid that you will offend the corporate or the SSA on certain expectation, right? I think putting it out actually protects the relationship, in fact, because then there's less gray area, there's less undercurrent, there's a greater clarity on roles, responsibility, and what to expect going forward, the vision of that partnership where it could lead to. So in fact, I think being able to put things on the table is actually to protect and to build relationship to bring it forward, actually. Yeah.
That's a wonderful opportunity for me to bring in the other questions, right? It's about accountability, as how Jimmy had put it. So maybe I hear from Keeling first, and then we go to Jimmy and potentially Priscilla on how do we then ensure accountability from volunteers, especially those who you have set up to do long-term partnership. Maybe Keeling, we start first.
Okay. For our organization, we do make them sign certain things like confidentiality undertaking, like photographs. If they're taking photographs, we return very strictly. Anything you want to publish, you have to clear our comms first, because we do need to get consent from clients. So I think because with the PDPA regulations, right, we use that to say that this is a regulation that is in place now. So we do really hope that you can respect that. But actually, we also increasingly find that sometimes they also make us sign. When we want to publish photos of their staff, we will also have to sign and clear them. So I think it's fine. It works both ways. So we have that common understanding. And I think, as Jimmy has mentioned, to say upfront, or if let's say you have any expectation, it's good to put upfront, because if either party are not willing to budge on that area, then maybe it's a telltale sign that maybe not yet, this relationship is not yet to be not ready for further development. But things like regulation, accountability, so far majority of our volunteers, they are quite okay with that, because they do understand that certain things that they cannot do.
It does sound like a very delicate process. If you can share with us one example, how do you then deal with corporate partners or even community group that refuses to do some of this documentation work that you require? How do you deal with those situations?
Okay, let's say, for example, if it's like an individual, if they don't want to sign like certain role, let's say befriender, and they don't want to sign the undertaking, then we do tell them upfront that, sorry, then you may not be suitable for this role. Maybe you want to do something else that don't require this. So with the corporates, it's the same thing. But so far, we are very thankful that we don't really have corporates that refuse to sign anything. I think because most of being a corporate, they also have their own regulations, so they do understand. So that's the good thing of it. So not to get too worried about that part.
Okay. Maybe we hear from Priscilla, having to engage with so many SSA. How do SSA usually deal with such a situation?
Yeah. So ultimately, this process of risk control or risk management, whatever we call it, right, ideally should not disrupt or disturb the volunteer experience. So even in so doing, the way we're doing, is it still manual forms, or is it actually very easy, just some e-form to just touch and then actually submit? So it's the whole flow that we're also seeing more SSAs are doing it in a little bit more a less cumbersome way. And even in the communicating, actually increasingly they are also being able to better nuance it, such that it's not so much of telling them the do's and don'ts, but somehow the corporate volunteers or any volunteers, when they sign all those forms, actually they can feel the heartbeat of why you're saying so. You are here maybe to protect the beneficiary. So I think and protect certain interests. And I think if we frame it in a certain constructive way, such that they know that the impetus and the core of the conversation was really for a certain greater good, and they will understand. I think when it's delivered that way, it will also help to better nuance. Then to some of the challenging situations, to what you also shared, posed to Keeling earlier, indeed, if somehow for whatever reason they don't really want to sign or whatever, then it's indeed a potential possibility and scenario of redesigning and rescoping certain things such that they could come in to just shadow and take a look first before they are really very convicted and convinced to say that, okay, I want to be full in, 2 feet in instead of 1 feet in. And when they shadow, of course, you can always pair them with someone who's a more seasoned volunteer to be there to kind of like share, how the process. And I think, again, it's nuancing and changing mindset. Maybe then eventually they'll be willing to sign the form, or the corporate, the whole entire corporate within, the CSR champion leading it will be able to sign the form.
Thanks, Priscilla. Jimmy, your thoughts?
Right, I think there's two parts to it. One is the pre-partnership, where it's between, say, the corporate and the SSA when they're exploring a partnership together. There's an internet assessment, because, and this is not about who is bigger than what, right? But really both, when come into partnership, both names is at stake, right? In terms of partnership, if anything go wrong, both names are involved, right? The organization. So I think it's about having that conversation internally with the decision makers on like, hey, to the potential partner has what it takes to carry out the program, the initiative, to partner together to bring to fruition. That's one. The second part is on post partnership. Then I think it's about dealing with the volunteering initiative, about briefing the volunteers. And when it comes to these aspects, I fully agree with Keeling in terms of, say, if there's certain requisition that is a must, for example, that the volunteer are not willing to sign certain things that is a must, then really, then he or she cannot take part in it. I think some of these things is good to just put it out there. And regarding volunteer briefing or onboarding, right? Sometimes it can be positioned not just as an additional chore, but really as a training for them. Because then you see that the SSA, beyond just about able to organize a volunteering opportunity for the corporate, is able to brief or to train the volunteers and prepping them how to work with person with special needs, for example, giving them an understanding on in this space. So sometimes some of these to-do need not be positioned as a to-do, but really is value to the volunteers who are involved as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy, for that. And maybe I'll come back to you, Jimmy. You're thinking about pre-partnership, you have all these things, and then during the partnership, you have a whole range of documentation and stuff. I think one of the questions asked by the audience is that increasingly we do know that the corporates want to know what kind of impact that they make, right? Typically, what do you think corporates will usually ask from SSA through this partnership, and how can SSA support that particular needs or aspect for the corporates?
First and foremost, I say that I don't have an answer to that, because there are really different kinds of volunteering opportunities, and each of these volunteering opportunities, each type of it may have a different goal. One, it could be just for the purpose of engagement, involving the volunteers who have not volunteered before to take the first step in volunteering, right? So that exposure itself could be the end goal itself, right? The other could be skill-based. Then you're looking for more long-term, and there's an impact there's an output that's expected out of the volunteering, right? That because of this person volunteering using his skills, there's something that is being created or improved in the system. So I think it really depends on what are the goals for each of these different type of volunteering that determines, the question. So I have to apologize, I can't answer that any better.
Yeah. Okay. And perhaps if I'll just continue with the question itself, if let's say maybe Keeling and Priscilla can also jump in here. If let's say the corporates do want all these numbers, we want to understand the impact, what's the best way that the SSA can support in such a reporting or data supply?
Okay, I'll take that. I think for us, one of the common one is so other than impact and numbers, all that, sometimes what they do want is maybe like can we give them information that they can write a story about it to showcase their efforts. So I think we do give them like things like photos, and we on our end the numbers first, we do track you let us know how many numbers, how many volunteers come, how many hours. Then if you are a long-term partnership with us, we have volunteer management, the CRM system that over maybe 1 year we can let you know this is the number of men volunteering hours you've given to us. So that kind of basic tracking that we do keep lah. Of course, not every corporate will ask for it, but that's why we try to accommodate what they want to have also, like in terms of photos, media points, and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can just add on to what Jimmy and Giling shared. So indeed, other than the first layer of information that a lot of corporates may want, which is like number of volunteers, number of volunteering hours, consider also going to the level 2 kind of information that sometimes may be useful for them to get to know better about, you know, the impact ultimately at the end of the day, after the volunteers have come, the volunteering hours, which could be, for example, I give an example, Samaritans of Singapore was able to articulate, you know, maybe because of the number of volunteers that they have for care tax program, and some of you might be familiar that other than the hotline crisis center that are also run by volunteers, they were also able to have a care tax service that they actually recently they launched, you know, so they were able to articulate, maybe they were able to serve more number of people via the care tax or maybe via the hotline service. And they were maybe, because of volunteers, they were able to maybe take in more calls at the same amount of time, which provides more prompt and efficient service and help on hand. So say, for example, if it's anything on inclusive employment, or, you know, it could be number of, or maybe number of children served, you know, for example, through this program, and they were able to expand that service, not just increase the number of children served, special children served, because of more volunteers coming in to outreach. They were also maybe able to, through a certain survey, like AWA has a quadrics, you know, they use a quadric system to maybe share that, oh, the number of elderly, you know, through this program that is also run by volunteers, they actually have an increase in satisfaction after the program. And those are very simple ways to get the elderly to just do some simple, you know, choices and touch buttons. So I think if we are able to increasingly get better at articulating the service impact that has moved as a result of volunteers coming in, meaning, you know, you're able to, let's say, imagine grassroots, they're able to reach 1 block, you know, within 1 week, but with more volunteers, actually within the same week, they can reach 5 blocks, you know, for example. And, you know, so these are the kind of things I think perhaps if we could again push new frontiers to try to gather, and if we don't have data source, consider building your data infrastructure to get simple data. I think that will help to articulate back to volunteer partners on really the impact of the people that they have brought the pipeline towards.
Maybe my last question, though, this is going to sort of morph from some of the questions asked by the audience. This session really focused about long-term volunteer partnership itself. Maybe I hear from the 3 speakers. What is one thing that you feel is really a key ingredient to make sure the long-term partnership is sustained, not just created, but sustained? Maybe I start from Keeling.
I think for me, it would be a whole organization approach, because it cannot be one touch point. It has to be the whole organization making effort to engage the volunteers, because they could be volunteer, they could be donor, they could be your advocates at some point in time. So to have that long-term partnership, you have to build that relationship, and it has to be everyone chipping in.
Jimmy or Priscilla, go ahead.
Yeah, so maybe we'll layer on a different perspective, which is I think consider when you build relationship, other than of course the interpersonal, you know, it's by the specific CEO, a specific volunteer manager, have at the back of our heads about bridging relationships entity to entity, because it will go beyond our years, it'll go beyond our time and season, and all that you do. Is there anything that you feel will be useful to institutionalize or to kind of like, you know, think about the longer term, be beyond, you know, our season? If we do leave, the relationship ideally should stay with the organization. So I think I don't have, of course, the specific sub pointers, but I think something to just take note at the back of our head to build bridges between entities, you know, beyond me, myself, and I. Yeah.
Okay. My sharing, I think that a volunteer manager truly will value add to his or her SSA when she comes in and everything goes up a level, and even when she leaves, you know, on Priscilla's point, really, that it doesn't go back to square one. And the way to do it is really about institutionalizing, putting things into system and processes to do that. So I think that's one that I will leave with in this, with you all in this. And maybe the second and third point really is that successful factor in strategic volunteer partnership, having clear value proposition for all the partners involved. So don't start a partnership just for the sake of because, oh, my boss said go and engage corporate, right? But know what you want out of it. And there's a clear value for all the parties that's going to be involved in that. Yeah, and I think the last point is about building trust, not just as a positive experiences. That means not just building trust in the heart, but building trust in that in the head, demonstrating your impact as a SSA, that your VM capability. I think that will really help in even the senior management in the corporate to see that, hey, like what Priscilla said, the VM practitioner is doing his job, know what he's doing, and then yeah, we can continue working with this organization. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Jimmy. Thank you so much, Kiling and Priscilla, for this wonderful sharing and also responding to as many questions as we can. We have obviously a lot more questions in Slido. We can't possibly answer them all. What we will do is that after today's event, NCSS and MPACT team, we will look at all the questions sent in. We will be focusing on the questions that's very specific to long-term strategic volunteer partnership, and we'll respond to those questions as provide those written response to those questions as much as possible. Thank you so much. If maybe we can, since we are on virtual and Zoom meeting itself, if you could just use a virtual clap and thank our three speakers for taking time to to share with us their experience and whatnot. Thank you so much. Right, so as we are coming to the end of the event itself, what I'm going to also invite our audience today is to give us a quick feedback about how you feel about today's session itself. We invite you to go back to Slido, and then if you can just help us to provide some of our your thoughts about how today's event, how it went well, and what we can improve on. If you're on your mobile phone, scan the QR code. If you're on your desktop, please use the slido.com and enter the event code 9147376. Right, we will run this survey, this feedback for about 2 minutes, so that we can also get more inputs from you as well. Right, as you complete the survey as well, please stay around. We would like to take a group picture with all of you. I think it's still about 100 plus of you around. If you can also stay with us, once we finish the survey, the feedback, we will do a quick group shot so that we can see how many of you are so participating in today's wonderful event. Right, we're getting the numbers coming in. Many of you are already doing your feedback right now. Please remember to click the submit so that your submission is also being captured as well. Well, we're getting quite good responses so far. Thank you so much for hanging around. I'm sure our speakers today will be most delighted that many of what you have shared today can be applicable in their role and also in the work with the SSA as well.
It was a pleasure to host Hebo, Kieran,
Right, thank you so much for you still staying with us and also sending in your feedback. These are really wonderful stuff from all of you. Rest assured, with the slides that our speakers have actually presented today will be shared with you, and also the link that you see Serene Chen early on from Philos will also be sent to you. Right. Right. Feel free to give us more information on what are the activities that you topics that you want to let us include in the next volunteer management network series itself. We have quite a number of submissions here. Right, so quite a bit of submission from there. I shall not hold everyone back. This is an opportunity for us to actually take a group picture, and I will get my team members to take as many group pictures as possible. So please turn on your camera, put on a big smile so that we can all see you. Right, do we know who is taking picture?
Me, I'll be.
Okay, all right.
I'll be taking the photo in count of 3.
Okay, shall we do the V as usual?
Oh, yes.
So volunteerism, volunteer managers who are very important, and volunteer management function, which is also very important. Okay, let's do V and smile year to year.
I'll be taking a few shots, so try to smile for a bit longer.
Okay.
I want a video, don't have to have.
1, 2, 3. Okay,
Okay.
another one.
I don't know. Don't know.
One more.
No,
1,
I can't. I don't know why.
and the last one. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Thank you so much, Ashikin, for taking the pictures. You will see the pictures later in the social media of the NCSS group as well. Maybe very quickly, the last sharing of what we have in mind for you. So some of you might already be very aware that NCSS has actually developed a learning and development roadmap. As part of the learning and development roadmap, there's actually a self-assessment tool. So feel free to go online to use this self-development roadmap self-assessment tool. You can take charge of your own professional development. There's a lot of wonderful things that is inside the tools itself for you to understand where are some of your skills gaps that can help you to improve in your volunteer management network work. And also coming up next in Q4, the NCSS team is going to launch the Volunteer Management Maturity Matrix, or VMM. And you can actually use this matrix itself to self-assess your agency's strengths and gap in volunteer management and get the right resources to get the right and relevant resources to improve your practices. Right. So stay tuned that we will release those information from NCSS very soon. Right. If not, just a quick reminder, the next event that we're doing is going to be on the 21st November. It's a Monday, and it's going to be the morning session. So the topic for next session itself will be enhancing and designing volunteer roles to activate potential volunteers and empower the communities, right? So that's the topic for the next event itself, right? Thank you so much for taking time to join us today, and see you at the next Volunteer Management Network event. Goodbye.
Thank you all for joining. Thanks.
Thank you.